welcome, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Remixing Politics and Culture with me, your host, Pam. I am a public relations and marketing professional with a passion for social justice, voter advocacy, and culture. And tonight, as you know, we're from time to time we have what we call culture talks, and we have these on occasion when things happen in our world that we just cannot not pay attention to something specific that is happening that can be other than highly political incident. On November 16th, 2023, just last week, a bombshell lawsuit was filed by a young lady by the name of Cassie Ventura. She is an ex-girlfriend and artist of Sean P. Diddy Combs. Some 35 pages were filed with horrific claims of sexual assault, sex trafficking, and severe domestic violence. Now, we've just dealt with the trauma and drama of R. Kelly. Who could forget that, right? And you would think that all music executives would have received the memo. You know, they would have cleaned up their act. They would have done something to get things together. But, and I have to say, I've done like a deep dive, and I'm going to include the paperwork from the 35-page filing in the you'll see it in the show. But the deep dive of things that I have looked at, it's overwhelming. And in many ways, the claims against him make R. Kelly look not as bad, if you can believe that. That's hard to believe, I'm sure. So at any rate, we're going to get going here and speak with our panelists. Our first panelist that I had up, she's not here right now. I hope that nothing's wrong, that we'll get her back. So I am going to pull up someone who you are familiar with from the past shows. We have Latrice Davis. Latrice is a senior court clerk in Queens County Civil Court in New York. She is a former journalist. Well, I don't know. She's a former journalist with the Associated Press, but I say once a journalist, you are always a journalist. Latrice is an active member of the Queens Community Board 6. She was appointed to that. And she is very active in her community and a woman on the know and on the go. Welcome back to the show, Latrice.
Thank you so much for having me, but I do have to issue a quick correction. As of last month, I transferred to Queens County Criminal Court. So after 3 years working in family court and 6 years in civil court, I am now working in criminal court. So
oh boy. So this show might
it's a lot. As always, thank you for having me. I'm really glad to be a part of this conversation. So thank you.
Absolutely. And next up, she is also familiar to our show, is Narissa Smith. She is a lawyer, speaker, professor, and journalist. She has taught criminal law, U.S. constitutional law, and classes such as critical race theory. Welcome back to the show, Narissa.
Hello.
She will offer us that very important lens of the law in this discussion, which is very important. And I still don't see our dear friend, Marcia. So now I'm a little worried. But anyways, we see you in the chat. Hi, Sidra Watkins. Hello.
Todd Marie, thank you. Good evening.
Hey, Dawn Daily Mac. Hey, you guys.
Good evening.
So good to see you all. Okay, ladies, so let's get right into it. I've got so much. Okay. So let me say this to everyone listening at the top of this show, and for those that hear it on the playback. Yes, this culture talk show this week is a culture talk show, and it's not politics specifically, but politics plays a very important role in this case. Within the lawsuit, the attorney writes, and I quote, thanks to the passage of New York's Adult Survivors Act and California's Sexual Abuse Accountability and Cover Up Act, the complainant is now ready and able to also confront her abuser and to hold him and those who enabled his abuse accountable for their actions. And how did that happen, guys? Because we elected people who made the laws and signed it into legislation to make this happen. And so for that, that is one. I have to show every example of how your vote matters. Do I get an amen from my panelists on that?
Amen.
Amen, Jay.
We gotta show it. We gotta show it. So, Latrice, native New Yorker, civil court clerk, now criminal court clerk, and journalist. What say you about this lawsuit? The 35. I'm gonna pull it up on the screen so people can see it. But what say you about this case? Because I know you being in New York, Diddy's from New York. New York, hey, that New York law case is why everybody was scrambling to file and what have you.
Well, there's so much I want to say. I'll try and keep it brief because I want to include other perspectives on this conversation. First and foremost, this case was filed in federal court in the Southern District, which is based in Manhattan. And they cited, and the lawsuit cited laws from New York as well as California, which makes sense because, according to the lawsuit, Diddy lives in California, but he did a lot of business here in New York. This is where Bad Boy was founded back in the summer of 1993. I remember those days clearly because I was in high school when Bad Boy came to be. And before that, he was at Uptown. He was an intern there. So I remember those days very clearly. But this is a federal lawsuit. It was filed in New York in the Southern District, but it cites laws from New York as well as California.
Yes.
And among the many thoughts I have about this is I read the report, I read the lawsuit, and it's a lot. It's a lot to stomach. And given all the chatter that surrounded him over the years, I would not be surprised if he did indeed do these things. And frankly, given how quick he was to settle, my gut tells me that he did not expect her to follow through on filing this lawsuit. And when she did and called his bluff, he was like, okay, I'll go ahead and pay you. Now, one thing I want to mention is this is a civil matter. So when you hear people say, oh, she's a gold digger going after money, it's like, well, civil matters involve monetary compensation. I think one of the issues in the community is that we have different definitions of what accountability should look like and what it should be. Like, for some people, it's monetary compensation, which is where civil court comes in. For others, it's lengthy incarceration, as is the case with Harvey Weinstein. For others, it's simply an acknowledgement that harm was done. That's for each party to decide for him or herself. But just so we're clear, when you hear people talking about, oh, well, Cassie's a gold digger, it's like, well, no, she filed it in civil court because she was seeking monetary compensation, which is doled out in civil court, not criminal court. Right. Also, the threshold of evidence in civil court is simply a preponderance of the evidence as opposed to beyond a reasonable doubt. They were together for like a decade plus. If there's video, and according to her, there is, that could be pretty damning. And again, I think that's another reason he was so quick to settle when he realized, she's calling my bluff. She's serious. And it's like, assuming that he proceeded with this, the discovery would have ate him alive. That's just
him alive.
That's just my theory. I really think the discovery would have eaten him alive.
And I just want to interject really quickly.
Sure.
Could you explain, Miss Latrice, exactly what discovery is for the folks who don't know, so they understand why he didn't want to go through the discovery process?
Well, basically, discovery is when the attorneys hand over information, documents, exhibits. We call them exhibits. They hand over exhibits regarding the case. So according to Cassie, one of the allegations was that he videotaped her having sex with other men while he masturbated. So if there's video of this, he doesn't want that to get out there for obvious reasons. And for her to put that out there, I mean, like, I just can't see her lying about something like that. I mean, you know, it's just, so it wasn't in his interest to go through with discovery, to have whatever she has, because another thing I had read was that she had wanted to write a book, but he kept blocking it. So who knows what the book would have contained, but whatever it is, he did not want that information reaching the masses. So.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Narissa, you are our resident attorney on the case. Yes, and I want you to give your thoughts on this case. You know what? I tried to show the document. Did you guys see it?
Oh,
yes,
yeah.
I got the email.
I can share, and I mean, I shared it on the screen, and I can.
Oh, yeah, I saw it on the screen
for the audience, but I hate it because when I share, I can't see you guys.
Yeah, no, I think it was great, and I just want to say, first of all, that everything that Latrice said was spot on, and I just want to back up a little bit, because I want to take it away from. Well, two things I want to say, and forgive me in advance because I'm about to talk for a minute, but I want to make two very important points. And the first one is going back to something that Latrice said about Cassie being a quote unquote gold digger, right? So I want to talk about that in two ways. First way is, as Ms. Davis mentioned, Cassie went through the civil system. Cassie didn't do that, I think, of her own volition. What y'all have to understand is that there are things in the law called statutes of limitation. And a statute of limitation is how much time you have before you can bring a claim, right? So for instance, if I see, Miss Pam driving down the street and we get into a fender bender, I can't just show up 20 years later and sue her for damages to my car. I only have, 2 or 3 years in most places to bring that lawsuit, right? And most people understand how that works, but that also exists on the criminal side, right? So you can't just bring a sexual assault allegation against someone like, 20, 30 years later, right? The reason why there are limits, and there's limits for pretty much every crime except for murder. Murder is a crime where in almost every jurisdiction it's like an unlimited, statute of limitations, because it's hard to prove. Right. Going back to that example of, if me and Pam get into a car accident, we have witnesses to the car accident. We have other things, pictures I might take, they can be destroyed, anything could happen. So there's reasons why we have those statutes of limitation. But the statute of limitations for a crime is different from the statute of limitations on a civil suit. When New York passed the law that Pam was talking about, that lengthened the amount of time to bring a civil suit. And a lot of those states that lengthened that, it came out of litigation that happened with the Catholic Church and the sexual abuse scandals that happened then. That was the genesis of a lot of that, because a lot of those victims were not able to get relief because so many things happened to them when they were younger. Yeah. And so they lengthen the amount of time. However, when you don't have recourse to that criminal path, this is like an alternative, right? So that's one thing that I wanted to know. And I want to come back and talk about the criminal justice system in a minute, as it is. But I also want to talk about I heard people throwing around terms like gold digger and other things too. And, I want to put on my critical race theory and women in the law hat for a moment, because the way that we talk about women in our society at large and in our community, the African American community, the smaller version, we have to be very careful about that. I will say that over the years, in some ways, things have gotten better. Some folks listening may be old enough to remember Desiree Washington, the young woman that accused Mike Tyson. And he actually was convicted for that. And people were saying things like, well, what she go up to his room that late at night for? She could, and people want to dismiss that. And then people saying things like, remember when Kobe Bryant was in the room with the young lady? Again, well, what she go to? Well, she actually worked at the hotel. She had every reason to go to his room at any time of night because he was a guest there and she was staff there. So all sorts of things happen. But the way that we talk about these folks, these survivors, we need to be a lot more careful. And we need to tell people, no, that's not okay, because language does matter. Little things like calling, the difference between when I was growing up, we called people slaves, right? No, now the historians like, no, people who are subject to enslavement or enslaved persons, because you don't want to say things that take away folks' humanity. And I think that that language of calling people a gold digger and all that other stuff is just another way to take away their humanity and to say, well, they could not be telling the truth about this person because I like the music that this person made. I like the clothes that this person made. I look up to this person. Therefore, there's no way that they could have done this. I'm going to make more points on that, but I was watching the clock. I've talked long enough, so I'm going to stop it right there.
I wanna share again the screen and read some of the points that are in her document or in her filing for the audience to hear that it, because not everybody's dug it up like I did. I just kept down the rabbit hole and
I could only read part of it. I made it through like a few parts, and I was like, I can't read any.
It's a lot, but it's worth reading just to get the full scope and the full magnitude of what Cassie was dealing with. Because one of the things that jumped out at me is when she shaved her head. And at the time, I was like, why did she do that? She looked fine with her hair as it was. Come to learn now, Puffy pulled it out.
Yeah,
we didn't know that at the time, or at least I did. Another example would be like an Instagram photo she posted. She had like a busted lip and like a bruise under her eye. And she just said, and she just wrote underneath it, I had too much fun and wherever she was traveling. Again, not knowing that Puffy's the one who did that to her. And so it puts things in perspective, and it goes back to what I was saying before. It's like, I can actually envision him doing these things.
Right.
Not to her.
When the allegations first dropped, my first instinct as an attorney was to go and read the complaint. And that was when I had to read a summary of it, because reading that it struck something in me. Usually I'm able to do, but I could, like, I'm even like now I can feel that it was a lot.
It is a lot
to think about what that young woman was going through at that time. But oh no, I'm the hair, the everything, and then the Instagram video where like she's writhing on the floor, and when he kicked her through the hotel, there's a lot that happened, and none of it is okay.
Right. There is so much in here, but there's some parts that I do want you guys to hear about, because what we're going to get into, not just the legal aspects, but the moral aspects. And that was one thing that I wanted Marcia to talk to, because she is an educator and a mentor of young people. And some of these things, as a mother of 3 daughters, I don't see. I understand where the kids are really excited about these things, but I don't. Okay, let's see. But I don't understand, where are the parents? I don't understand.
That's a short question with a long answer, because you mentioned R. Kelly at the beginning, and it made me think of Aaliyah.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I met Tarana Burke at a speaking event a couple of years ago. I think it was before the pandemic. And
who Tarana Burke is, for people who don't.
She's the founder of Me Too.
Right. Okay.
So, as you know, when Aaliyah came out, and I said this to her in all honesty, when the story came out about Aaliyah and R. Kelly being married, I truly thought at the time that was a marketing ploy. Because as some of you may or may not know, Aaliyah's uncle was her manager. Her parents were behind the scenes. So I'm thinking, there's no way her parents are going to let a 15-year-old girl marry a guy who's almost twice her age. I really thought it was a marketing ploy. It's not like, the whole age ain't nothing but a number. You just, you shrug it off. You don't think, again, hindsight being 2020, it's like, man, you see things with clearer eyes now. So in terms of where the parents are, it depends. I mean, I think some parents are simply as clueless or naive about navigating the industry as the young women who try to make a break in it. And then others simply don't care.
I think a lot of parents, it's all about the money. But I want to read to you guys this. This is the part I was looking for. Mr. Combs forces Miss Ventura into sex trafficking. And again, you'll see on my banner, it says all commentary is alleged. These are things that are found readily on the internet that were filed in court documents. Okay, so we're on chapter 5 essentially of this complaint, where he talks, where the lawyer talks about sex trafficking. Within a few months of beginning a romantic, that word bothers me, relationship with 40-year-old Mr. Combs, the 22-year-old Ms. Ventura. He met her when she was 19, so a few years have come through now. Felt beholden to his whims and demands. While in New York City, Mr. Combs told Miss Ventura that he wanted to engage in a fantasy of his called voyeurism. Mr. Combs said that it would turn him on if he saw Miss Ventura with another dick. The first time Mr. Combs hired a man and brought the man to his home in Los Angeles, the man, Mr. Combs, and Miss Ventura wore masquerade masks and ingested drugs. That's another thing in this complaint. It talks about how he introduced her to drugs, ecstasy and whatnot, giving her pills, all of that kind of stuff. Excuse me, allegedly. Mr. Combs directed Ms. Ventura to perform sexual acts with this man. While Mr. Combs watched them, he masturbated while he directed Ms. Ventura and the man to do specific sex acts. The entire encounter lasted multiple days. Mr. Combs began to call the arrangement a freak off, or FO. He would repeatedly tell Ms. Ventura at random moments that he wanted an FO, and Ms. Ventura was eventually expected to facilitate the location and the hiring of male sex workers. At certain points during Ms. Ventura and Mr. Combs' relationship, he would insist on an FO weekly. Mr. Combs would repeatedly tell Ms. Ventura that this practice was our thing and our secret. FOs would often take place in hotel suites, including at the Trump International Hotel in Columbus Circle, L'Hermitage, Beverly Hills, the London Hotel in Los Angeles, the Intercontinental Century City, the Intercontinental Atlanta, the Intercontinental New York City, the One Hotel in New York and in Miami, the Mandarin Oriental Hotel in New York and in Miami, the Fontainebleau in Miami, the Beverly Hills Hotel, and Shutters on the Beach in Los Angeles. On one occasion, around 2013, Mr. Combs had an FO set up at the Intercontinental Hotel in New York City, after which he was charged with tens of thousands of dollars in damages by the hotel. Upon information and belief, Mr. Combs' chief of staff Tony Fletcher paid the invoice charged by the hotel. Ms. Ventura was eventually instructed to use websites and escort services to find male sex workers to participate in the FOs. Mr. Combs told Ms. Ventura to search for large black penises on the website. And sometimes Combs would pay to fly male sex workers to his location, including to multiple cities in the United States, as well as abroad. He required Ms. Ventura and his staff to help him make these arrangements. Mr. Combs' assistants would help to set up the FOs, including by setting up the hotel suites with baby oil and Astroglide. Mr. Combs always supplied Ms. Ventura and the sex worker with copious amounts of drugs before and during the FOs. Ms. Ventura was given ecstasy, cocaine, GHB, ketamine, marijuana, and alcohol in excessive amounts during FOs, which allowed her to disassociate during these horrific encounters. It became commonplace to get IV fluids in the days after an FO to recover from the excessive substances pushed upon her. I won't read any more of that, but that gives you a great eye view, an earful of the sex trafficking charges. And what I heard in all of my deep diving on the internet, on YouTube, at various vloggers and people that they were interviewing who were adjacent to this lifestyle, they were saying that they believe that some of these kids that are in the sex trade thing, they're underage.
That wouldn't surprise me at all. In fact, what you described is textbook a pimp's playbook, pretty much. Right. If you get the person under the influence, they don't have impulse control, so they're right. more vulnerable to your whims, or in this case, degradation. Yeah. And it's pretty much textbook. One thing I want to point out is regarding the laws in New York, and as I mentioned at the top, it's federal because as you read yourself, this involves crossing state lines. Most likely they were flying, so okay, that's airspace, that's federal territory. But in terms of New York statute of limitations, a lot has changed from Me Too. As of 2019, the statute, the Adult Survivors Act, expired last week. Right. A 1-year window. Whether or not it's going to be extended is subject to interpretation, but I don't think it will be necessary to extend it because as of 2019, the statute of limitations for first-degree rape, sexual abuse, or incest or sexual conduct against a child, first degree, there's no statute of limitations. Second degree, statute of limitation has been extended to 20 years. And then third degree rape, criminal sexual act, what have you, is now 10 years. Until recently, it was 5. So now that the statute of limitations has been extended on a criminal basis, and this is Article 30 of the CPL I'm referring to, Section 3010. And then on the civil front, CPLR Section 213, or Article 213, 213C, an action can be filed for rape, criminal sexual act, incest, aggravated sexual abuse within 20 years. So now that the statutes of limitations have been extended, I'm not sure that the Adult Survivors Act will be renewed because it may not be necessary, but that's for the state legislature to decide. Right. So I just want to put that out there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just wanted to say, to go back to your original point about, before we got into it, I had a couple things that I wanted to put on. First, quick point, whether or not the escorts that they hired were underage, there's still an issue because a lot of, not all, because I don't want to demean sex workers, but a lot of these kids are exploited, whether they are underage or whether they are in their young teens or their 20s. A lot of them turn to it out of desperation. For instance, I'm going to take a right turn. It's not going to seem like it makes sense, but in like fundamentalist Mormon communities where they practice polygamy, a lot of the young men, once they reach puberty or young adulthood, they're pushed out. And a lot of them then go to places, like Las Vegas or Los Angeles and turn to sex work because they don't have any other options because they're not educated and they've been kicked out of their home and everything that they've known. Right. Wow. That is a huge. But the other thing you mentioned, where were the parents?
Yes.
And I wanted to go back and mention that because a couple of things. What ends up happening, I think, is that in America in particular, there is such a taboo around sex education. And a lot of parents don't even tell their kids the minimal things that they need to know about how their bodies work and what happens, right? That is bad enough in and of itself, right? However, we need to add to, when we talk about sex education, really we should call it relationship education, because so many parents aren't telling their kids about the warning signs of what to look for in a relationship. There are warning signs. Like, not every abuser is evil. Like, there's this Julia Roberts movie, Sleeping with the Enemy.
Yeah.
Right? One of the knocks on that movie is that it kind of doesn't portray, because they don't just go like from 0 to 60, right? It's like there's actually, you can Google it. There's a picture that shows the cycle of abuse.
Yes.
Right? It's like a tension and a buildup.
Yes.
Then there's an explosion. There's like a honeymoon period. And it's that honeymoon period that gets people thinking, okay, I can stay. He apologized. He said he's not going to do it no more, and all of these things. But I think that a lot of parents don't talk to their kids about those things, and they may not know how. They may not have been given the tools, but I think that it's inherent on every parent, whether you have daughters, sons, non-binary kids. You need to talk to them, because they need to know what to look for. And one of the things I really want to talk about, since we were talking about this is a culture talk, I want to go back to Keke Palmer for a second.
Yeah, go ahead.
And recently, we now know that Keke Palmer not only has broken away from her child's father, but has also filed for a restraining order. Right. And she also had stills from video showing how he was pushing her around, in the home. But a few months ago, when she wore that dress to the Usher concert, and her partner at the time was saying, oh, well, you can't be out there dressing like that. A lot of women in particular were like, whoa, like, she can't be letting him, talk to her like that. And what a lot of people don't realize is that even little things like that, trying to where you go, who you spend time with, abusers want to isolate and control. And the more isolated you are, the easier it is to control you. Now, they might not smash your phone. They might say, why you got to talk to her? She always got her mouth. She always, it starts off slow. And I really wish that more, not just parents, but schools, this should be part of our school curriculum.
Yeah.
Just like how they were used to take, I remember when they would take the boys and the girls in separate rooms and say, this is what's going to happen to me. They need to have the boys and the girls in the same room and say, this is the signs and the red flags you need to look for in a relationship. And the other part, talking about the parents, with drugs and pills, a lot of parents, I think about Robert Downey Jr., the Iron Man actor. He did a documentary about his dad, who was also a director in Hollywood. And his father said one of the reasons why he thought that Robert got addicted to drugs at such a young age is because they never talked to him about it. It's like, well, we did drugs, and we didn't want to seem like we were being hypocrites by saying don't do it. And he said he hated himself for that, because he should have said, no, don't do, like, you don't need to be doing that. You know, we're grown people and we decide to do one thing. That's one thing. But no, you being a young, you don't need any parts of this. Right. And I think parents who may have experimented, or they might feel some sort of shame. No, in addition to talking about sex and relationships, we have to talk about drug use, and how drug use, especially in, you know, the part that it can put you in a vulnerable position. This is not to victim blame, but how drugs and alcohol, which is perfectly legal, and it will put you in a vulnerable position where people can take advantage of you. So you have to be aware and say that, because I'm sure that if she had not wanted to take the drugs, I'm sure then his violence would have escalated. So I'm definitely not victim blaming, but we got to talk to our kids about all of these things.
Well, and also, I just want to piggyback on what Narissa's saying, because we can go back even further with Drew Barrymore. I mean, by the time most girls hit puberty, she was in rehab, and I remember back then, you would see her at the club smoking a cigarette, and her mother's like, "Oh, she's so cute," and we all just shrugged it off. But now we be like, you know, it's very cringe-inducing now, but at the time, man. I remember those things.
She had an alcohol problem by the time, I think she said she was 11.
Oh my God!
Yeah, she was a full-blown addict by the time she was a teenager. And to Keke Palmer's situation, I tweeted earlier this month about my thoughts on that, and you know how that, like you said, there's always signs. One of the signs is he calls you out your name. That's usually the first sign. Like, it's not like, oh, you go out on a date with a guy and then he's punching you in the face like Mike Tyson after the first date. And no, it rarely, if ever, goes that way. It usually starts off like a slow burn. Like I said, he calls you out your name. Then he's always gaslighting you, saying like, you know, if you're not with him, you must be cheating or something along those lines. Then it's like, okay, your schedule, like, okay, like he wants to know where you are, where you at, what you doing. And after a while, you're like, okay, are you my man or are you my parole officer? Because last time I checked, I didn't commit a crime. But it's usually things like that.
It seems so normal because let me do it in such a way.
Yeah. Let me tell you this. One of the things that Cassie said in her complaint is that she talked about after he has stomped her in the face. I mean, it's all kinds of stuff in that 35-page complaint of what what she alleges that he has done to her. But one thing he would do is that then he would love bomb her with the most expensive
honeymoon period,
thousands and thousands of dollars. Well, let me tell you what's interesting. That's a pattern from all the stuff that I've read on his cases, because on YouTube, it is just case after case after case. Everybody is talking now, even Suge Knight. Bodyguards are talking. When Cassie filed this suit, it put everybody undercover. And I'm going to tell you this. What's so heinous about P. Diddy's case is one thing that he allegedly did to her that several people have come out and said over and over again is that he wanted her to have breast augmentation, and she did. And then after she had it, literally he didn't like it, went to the doctor's door and told him, you got to take them out. Who takes out breast implants, does breast implants after you've just had them? You know, it takes months to heal. Do you know that doctor took them out?
And this is why this goes back to you.
Wait, let me finish. He took them out, and a year later, he is dead. He went over a cliff driving somehow. He made an accident and he went over a cliff. There is so many things in this man's story allegedly that are just.
But speaking of doctors, since you brought it up, she couldn't get her medical records of the times when abuse had occurred because he was paying people. That is the part I was.
And that's HIPAA.
HIPAA laws are violated to the nth degree. These doctors have violated their Hippocratic oath, everything. All the HIPAA. He was getting her records emailed to him.
And that's why I said about and that goes back to my point about discovery, because there's all this stuff can easily be checked. I mean, not just the doctors, but the male sex workers in terms of the hotel bills, bank records could be subpoenaed for five up to the last 5-10 years. So all this stuff could easily be checked. And like I said, he doesn't want this out there. So that's why I think he settled so quickly.
Yeah, because I think the damage is done, though. And one thing that I want to say, I do think that one thing that was good to see compared to previous allegations, I do think there was more support for Cassie, at least from what I felt like I saw. Yeah. But I think the downside, though, is that I feel like part of it might have been that there were also men who backed up her story, like Kid Cudi, the rapper. It's like, well, I'm going to blow up his car. And Kid Cudi was like, yeah, that happened. Devontae Swing from Jodeci, he had said, some things that, he saw, verified her. There were so many people who were saying things that were like, yeah, like we saw this happen. Two rappers who have a podcast. Oh, gosh, I am blanking on this. It's not Benzino, but it's like too old school.
Joe Budden.
Yeah, and they were talking about how they, had seen some things. So I just want to say that, yes, we should believe women. And it's always good when people have stories that are corroborated.
Yes.
But not all abusers are going to be as careless as someone as Diddy, especially those who may not have the resources or a legal team behind them. And notice how Cassie, one of the things she said is that he was very careful most of the time not to hit her in the face. That was one of the things that
but he would stomp. She's gotten the complaint that he stomped her in the face.
Yeah, exactly. But notice that she said though that most of the time though he would try to avoid her face.
But the bottom line is, then when he beat her up so bad, he sent her off to a hotel to heal up. So I'm trying to figure out,
and check the medical record.
How do you gotta heal if you're hit? You get stomped and kicked and bruised up so badly, you would need some still medical assistance, wouldn't you? I would think.
Yeah, but that's why I said, like, there's very easy ways to corroborate that. And if you subpoena medical records, if you subpoena financial statements, again, all of this would come out in discovery. I agree with Narissa that the damage has been done for Diddy. In his case, the two other women have come out alleging things against him. The most recent story I read was when he was at Uptown, and this incident allegedly took place in January 1991. So I tweeted two sentences. First, he was an intern at the time. He didn't get fired from Uptown till like summer 1993. He was an intern at the time. And number two, according to the story, Devontae didn't want the woman to say anything because Jodeci had just signed and they were working on their debut album, and he was afraid of getting dropped from the label. Now, I would love to hear Devontae's side of that, because I'm thinking to myself, as an intern, Puffy had that kind of clout. But nevertheless, I do, given everything I know and everything I remember through the years, again, I can definitely see Puffy doing these things. Like, I can't sit here and say, oh, that doesn't sound out. I can't say that sounds out of character for him. It's like, no, that sounds like something he would do.
It sounds exactly like something. We're getting a lot of activity in the chat. Rappers, Taj Marie says, rappers like P. Diddy have been normalized by leaders such as Al Sharpton and Maxine Waters. My question for the panel is, what should be the responsibility of politicians regarding entertainers?
Well, I think first and foremost, the responsibility lies with Sean Combs himself.
Yeah.
He's an adult. At the end of the day, he's responsible for his behavior. He's 50-something years old. You mean to tell me he doesn't know any better? So, I mean, the past couple of years with Me Too, the one good thing about it is that men have been put on notice. So here it is, Me Too happened, 5-6 years ago? And he's still doing these things? Because remember, he and Cassie only broke up recently, within the past couple of years. So it's not like, oh, we're talking about something that happened 5, 10, 20 years ago. He was doing this probably up until the pandemic. I don't know what year they broke up, but the point being, he knows better. So in terms of his behavior, it's not on Al Sharpton. It's not on Maxine Waters. It's not on us. It's not even on his mama. Although it'll be very easy to blame his parents. It's ultimately on him.
Yeah.
He did his thing. And I honestly suspect that Cassie is not the only woman he's mistreated.
Oh, hey,
absolutely not. Because these folks always have a pattern.
It's so many. It's so many stories. I went down the rabbit hole so deep. It was just it blew my mind. It blew my mind. As should they be in our political spaces in the first place? She's saying entertainers, but you know, during the civil rights movement, it was a lot of entertainers.
Gary Belafonte, Mahalia Jackson.
Exactly. Yeah.
And I just wanted to go to that and to say I agree with what Latrice said, but just to add to that, I would say it's definitely not Al Sharpton or Maxine Waters' fault. The closest thing I could come to thinking about a fault would be when my alma mater gave Puffy an honorary degree. Howard gave him an honorary degree about 10 years ago, and that was somewhat controversial. But the controversy, none of this had come to light yet. The controversy was more so about the fact that he had been enrolled at Howard but didn't graduate.
But he never graduated. Yeah, I remember that.
People were kind of upset about that, but also was like, what kind of contribution had he made to the culture, and was it a positive or a negative one? I'm a hip hop head. I do not think that hip hop, I think hip hop has definite issues with women, but I also think you want to talk about going down a rabbit hole. I always say, who runs these record labels? Who's in control? It ain't us, just like we say about the drugs, so that's a whole other show we could do on that. But I would say that we as a community need to be more careful about who we love. And speaking of being I remember it back in the day when Eazy-E and NWA, and so aren't you guys role models? Eazy-E would say, I'm not your role model. That's not my job. I'm an entertainer. And I do think that part of the issue when you have a community that is broken and fractured in so many ways, and you have so many kids that need guidance, is that kids tend to latch on to whatever's there. So if you have an absent parent or parents and you see or hear people on the radio or on the TV, then you'll turn to that. So we have to make sure that we are giving kids actual real people that they can turn to and look to in their classrooms, in their communities. And we also have to teach our kids, hey, that's not reality. What these folks are rapping about, like 50 Cent is a millionaire. You think that he's still having shootouts every weekend? No, like that's not real. So we have to tell kids about the reality. The Roots have this great song called What They Do, but in the video for that, it's like,
I love that video.
Like house, and they say it's rented. They say we have all these girls like models. This is how much they cost per hour. They have a fancy car. Like, this is how much the car. Basically saying none of it is real.
Yes. I love that video. I love that video.
That's one of my favorite songs by The Roots. And like getting the kids to understand that that is not reality, or that's only one version of reality. And getting our kids to feel empowered to write their own realities. That's something that we as a community have to make sure that we're doing, especially for kids who may have fallen through the cracks and who lack role models or who lack care. We got to make sure that we're doing a better job of that.
Now, one thing I want to get to Taj Marie's comment about Diddy screwing over his artists financially. And I want to, we speak of empowerment. One thing I think a lot of people don't realize, for one reason or another, a lot of these entertainers in the music industry is filled with sycophants and enablers because they don't have union protection. Like, these artists are very much on their own. They are very much on their own when they get in the game. And if you don't have any experience, if you're fresh out of high school or college and you don't know anything about how the industry works, it is very easy to be taken advantage of. With the artists, they signing these contracts. Like, when I read that he signed Cassie to a 10-album deal, and I'm thinking, okay, that's a vulture move right there, because most artists, hell, look at Beyonce. She's been in the industry for more than a quarter century. Has she put out 10 albums? No. So it's like that right there jumped out as a red flag to me. And again, she's 19. She may not know any better. She may think, wow, that's 10 albums is awesome. But any artist will tell you signing a 10 album deal is a bad move. Yeah. The typical album deal is like 3 albums because you need to sell. And even though Cassie had a couple of hits, she wasn't that kind of artist. She's not on Beyonce's level or Rihanna's level or Taylor Swift's level for that matter to be putting out to be signed to a 10 album deal. So that right there jumped out at me that this isn't kosher. And not only that, but okay, in terms of publishing rights, again, I don't know how savvy she was when it came to that, but I mean, all these things. It's just something to think about that. So I just wanted to touch on what Taj Marie was saying, how, again, like people being screwed over. It's like, if you're not savvy, if you're not surrounded by people who have your best interests at heart, then you will get taken advantage of, unfortunately.
Absolutely. And speaking of taking advantage, I had written a note and I forgot about it, but I want to bring this up because no one has talked about this yet. She was very young when their association started. Right. And as you said, she was 19. And this leads to the other thing. Puff Daddy has this pattern of getting with women that are much younger than
Young Miami.
Yeah, I was just about to say Young Miami.
Young Miami.
Risha, she's much younger as well. And I mean, he's not the only one. Leonardo DiCaprio, basically on your 26th birthday, he sends you some lovely parting gifts and sends you on your way. But that should be listed on the other red flags. That would see men who are constantly looking for women who are way younger than them, right? That should be a red flag. Yes. Because that means that they're looking for someone that they can control and manipulate. Because as women get older, they get wiser and more mature. And a man who doesn't want to deal with a woman his own age, basically, because she's going to see through the BS a lot faster. Oh, yes. Because she's been through so. But a woman who is younger, and the same thing goes with guys too, but it just happens more with men, right? And that is what's going on. So I do think that it is very, very, those are other things we got to talk to our kids about. If an older man is sniffing around you, why is he sniffing around? How old was his last? If everybody else he dated was age appropriate, he just happened to fall. I don't know. Maybe it's not a pattern, but if it's a pattern, you should definitely run in the other direction because
but that's just the thing. If it's a pattern, it'll jump out at you. Because again, like with Leonardo DiCaprio, to my knowledge, he hasn't been accused of any sex crimes, but it still raises a red flag because it's like, dude, you're almost 50. You mean to tell me you can't meet a woman out there in her 40s or even her 30s? Like if you, again, I've noticed it as well. And again, as long as it's consensual between both parties, I'm gonna mind my business and keep it moving. But that doesn't make it any less strange because you're right. It's also a maturity thing. I was reading about R. Kelly, how he was very, I hate to say immature, but like he had like a juvenile like sense of humor, like potty, he was into potty humor and shit like that. Things that kids would be into. So it sounds like mentally, even though he was a grown man, mentally he was still a teenager.
Yeah. Yeah. And Taj Marie was responding to one of our to Lynette about Gene Deal confirming about Cassie's allegations. I've been all into these internet streets, and yes, the assistant Capricorn getting beaten up for covering up the fact that she knew that Cassie and Kid Cudi were talking a little bit. I don't even think that they had.
Yeah, it was basically he was flirting with her because Kid Cudi came out and said, yeah, he was flirting with her. He was showing interest. And then when the car incident happened, he was kind of like, okay, I like you, but I don't like you that much. I'm going to back off,
And Diddy actually fought him at a club when he saw him. And he was like, oh, I heard you was talking to Cassie, and tried to fight him. And there's video of that, you know, when he tried to attack him and fight Cuddy when he saw him, is like, basically stay away from Cassie. And if you'll be violent like that out in public, that's another red flag. If you're going to be violent out in public, what will you do behind closed doors? And again, though, I have to say, I think that the money is a big factor here. I don't want people to come away thinking that this is what every case of domestic violence or intimate partner violence looks like, because everybody can't afford concierge medical care to come to a hotel. Because most of the time when you go to a hospital to get treatment, they're mandatory reporters, and they're going to ask, what happened to you? What's wrong? And the social workers are going to ask, and they see this stuff all the time. So it's going to be hard. So a lot of these women are not going to go to the hospital if they think they can suck it up, or they're going to lie. And I wanted to talk about systemically, African American women and other women of color are far more likely to suffer domestic violence, and also less likely to report it. And that is very sad. And that is something that we as a community can do something about by supporting and encouraging the folks who are brave enough to come forward. Now, the other part of why some Black women don't come forward is something we can fight for, but it's not in our control, which is they're afraid that if they call the police, that the police might victimize them, because Black women are also more likely to be sexually harassed or sexually abused by police officers, or that the police officer might kill their partner. They might be like, I want a restraining order against him. I didn't want you to kill him. You know, so there's a lot of stuff that goes into this. But when people say, oh, it couldn't have been that bad, she stayed for him for almost 10 years. There's a lot that goes into this. This is a very deep psychological thing, but also the legal system has really just started getting a hold of it. I remember when I was in law school, and this seems like ages ago, they had just changed the law so that someone in a sexual assault case, you couldn't ask them about their sexual history. So think about this. Before 1998, the rules of evidence allowed someone who accused someone else of sexually assaulting them to ask about their sexual history. So that means, for instance, someone who was a sex worker, it's like, oh, she's not telling the truth because look, she done slept with. That means she probably wanted it.
Yeah.
That is not that long ago. That's 25 years. And that was just a small step in the direction. It was around that same time that a lot of states started allowing the battered women's defense for assault and homicides and things like that. So we also have to keep in mind that the more we learn about the way that humans actually work, that's great. But the law has always been somewhat slow to catch up. So I always say the law is about 15 to 20 years behind where we are in terms of technology and social development. It catches up eventually, and we can push it in some places, but it does take time. But that goes back to what Miss Pam said. That's why we got to vote. Convince people, get people in there that will get that ball moving a lot faster.
Right.
One thing I always say when I'm on social media, and Pam knows this, is that I always say, if somebody wants to tell on themselves, who am I to stop them? And if you if you went down the rabbit hole, like you see these old interviews with Aaron Hall and all these other rappers, it's like, again, they're telling on themselves.
Telling it all. It's all out there. It's all out there. Here we got to address this. Sincere, I'm here. One says, no, the real question is, what responsibility for elevating these rappers and other entertainers to try and influence the youth?
Well, I don't necessarily think it's political figures who are elevating the likes of Puffy. It's consumers. I mean, politicians are. I mean, I seriously doubt Al Sharpton's going to the record store, buying P. Diddy's albums or downloading his stuff off Spotify. I could be wrong, but it's more educating the consumers and making them aware, making them more media savvy. I think that's what it comes down to. And that's why I had mentioned earlier about how a lot of these artists, there's no union protection for musicians. I think if there was, maybe that would have made a difference. I can't say that with certainty because, okay, if Cassie refers to herself as an employee of Diddy, so, so therefore workplace protection should have come into play. But because she's in an industry, in a profession where they don't have union protection, again, they're very much on their own in terms of figuring things out. And that's why having a support system is so important. Beyonce's in the news, and, I'll say this about her. She had her parents in her corner from day one. I think that made a huge difference because I'm pretty sure Beyonce has seen and heard things. I'm not saying she's done things, obviously, but you don't think Diddy and other rappers tried to make their move on her before Jay-Z came along?
Yeah, yeah.
I'm sure she can attest to how grimy it is behind the scenes.
Her parents and stuff. And Lynette, I got some other fellow rabbit hole people here. Thoughts on Revolt? Hey, Diddy owns Revolt.
Exactly. Diddy's footing the bill. That's why Joe Budden is all of a sudden clamming up now, like, oh, I don't want to talk about it because, hey, Diddy pays his bill.
He pays their bill. And listen, guys, and that's where, unfortunately, where Black media matters, because whoever controls the narrative has the cheese, right? And so you know what? I've not paid a whole lot of attention to Revolt. So, but he owns that. And the Breakfast Club, I don't know.
It's syndicated on Power 105, at least here in New York it is.
I know it is.
But like when you think about like with Megan Thee Stallion, the rapper, her trial, who ended up that white reporter, Megan Cunniff. And, there's been rumblings about her, like, why did we, people saying, why are we letting her into the culture, or however you want to phrase it. But again, like Black media came up short. They were trafficking in innuendo and rumors as opposed to doing basic gumshoe work, just letting the facts play out. Again, like something as simple as attaching a PDF of the lawsuit or of a motion. Let that tell the story. But no, they wanted to traffic in other things and get those eyeballs and go viral. And that has come at the expense of their credibility, unfortunately,
Right. Yeah. Here's another one. Sorry. What's the panel's opinion on Charlemagne the God and the allegations on him? Nobody is holding him accountable or discussing it. I don't know what's going on with Charlemagne. I knew what was.
He's been accused of things. I guess this goes back to the question I asked earlier, Ms. Watkins. What is your definition of accountability? Like, are you is the victim or is the alleged victim seeking monetary compensation, incarceration, just simple acknowledgement that he did wrong by her? Like, what definition of accountability are we applying here?
Yeah, and there are different kinds of accountability, which leads us full circle in this, because if you don't have one type of accountability, you might be able to get another. And I think a good example of that is the O.J. Simpson case. They did not win in the court for the murder trial, but the parents of Nicole Brown and Ron Goldman, they were able to sue in civil court, right? But I think that what's interesting is that no one is like, okay, gold diggers, or whatever. But the legal system on the civil side, it's the money is to make you whole. And what that woman Cassie went through for all those years, I would say that money could directly go to her therapist. I mean, this woman needs some help healing from all of that. So my other response,
she's going to spend the rest of her life healing from this.
Given to her credit, she is getting counseling and help. She's had 2 children now. She's married and 2 children and what have you. And her husband is, from what I understand, he's real slick with the mouth about things and stuff. So it's interesting. It is really, really interesting. I wanted to show you guys something else. One of Diddy's white parties. Now, what's interesting is that the white party is something that we've heard about forever and ever. But from my understanding, the real things that go down is the after party. But these are the things that attract our young people and people to the entertainment industry. And it's so glamorous and everything. And it's just something. Let me see. Let me share the screen. And I'm going to find that. Oh, here it is.
Everybody put your glasses up in the air. Let's take a toast to Sean Combs, Puff Daddy, Camp Florida. Let's go, everybody take a shot. Let's take a a nigga finna get loose. A nigga finna get loose. A nigga finna get loose. A nigga finna get loose.
Well, as we see, it's so glamorous, it's so whatever. God only knows what happened after that 50th birthday party a few years ago.
And well, you know what they say, all that glitters isn't gold.
Sure isn't.
We learned that as children.
It sure isn't.
And I think that goes back to something else that you were saying about parents, like Aaliyah's parents, and parents, if they're seeing the glamour and the glitz and the money, they might be swayed by that. Maybe they're swayed to think their children are safe, because in this capitalist society, we're always taught to think that wealth also equals morality. Because poor people, clearly, they have no morals, et cetera, when actually that is not necessarily true. And neither is it true that all wealthy people are upstanding citizens, but that's the way it is portrayed. Exactly. So we have to start interrogating that. And also we have to, again, learn which questions to ask of our kids about who they're spending time with and why they're spending time with them. And this also goes back to the question that was posed earlier about, why perhaps does our culture elevate? Is because status and success. Who doesn't want that? Looks like a fun party. Who wouldn't want to be at that party? It's a lot of famous, talented people there. Looks like everybody's having a great time, right? But you also have to learn to have some kind of,
discernment.
Exactly. And to say, you just can't trust everybody.
Well, the old school it holds true. I raised 3 daughters. My kids are grown. And I was always there. I was always involved, always, I didn't just allow them to be. I allowed my eldest daughter. She traveled the world and everything, but I had vetted people very carefully before I allowed my children to be around certain people. They couldn't be around people I didn't know. I mean,
Yeah.
So sad, too bad. That's just the way it was. And that's the way, and I still am always wondering about, you always do want to know who their friends are, who they're associated with. Case in point, Shaquella, that young girl from North Carolina that got
oh, she went to Mexico. Yeah.
Mexico with so-called friends and she never came back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Friends like that who need enemies.
Exactly. So she's trying this question again. This isn't about politicians elevating the artist status, but politicians using the entertainer status to influence the Black community to move a certain way politically.
Well, the one thing that comes to mind is, if you remember, not too long ago, you had the Vote or Die campaign. I remember Puffy being a part of that.
T-shirt, yeah.
Like, I take it that's what Since I'm Here one is referring to, like the Vote or Die campaign. I think, I think just we as a whole, we have to be more discerning with who we align ourselves with, because again, like I saw Dr. Dre in that video, he has a past.
Yeah.
Again, I'm sure a lot of those guys in that industry, especially when you get to be where Diddy is or where Jay-Z is, they've seen and heard things. They may have done things. I don't want to say they all have skeletons, but they definitely have some dirt underneath their fingernails.
Right.
I hope I answered your question, Since I'm Here one.
Yeah. And I think just to add to that, also you have to look at what did these people know and when did they know it. I'm not going to fault Al Sharpton for inviting Diddy to a voting rally in 1998 or 2000 or 2004 if none of this stuff was known and widely suspected, because I don't think it's fair to ask people to either be time travelers or be omniscient and know everything. But I would say, however, that going forward, I do think that there should perhaps be a better vetting process of, who is invited to certain things. And then I'm just going to throw the controversial thing out here. Are women perfect? No. But statistically, are women less likely to commit sexual assault and be doing all those things? Yeah. So maybe this just means that it's time for more women to be involved in politics, more LGBT people and other stuff. And maybe that's part of the reason why we have this problem, is because the same people have been in power for too long and they all protect each other.
Yep.
Very bravo. Very well said. Excellent point. Sidra Watkins, the accusations have been made. Charlemagne denied it, and nothing else has been done or mentioned. I don't know what the victims want. I just want to know why.
Wesley, was there an investigation into the allegations?
From what I saw, this just came out, again, it resurfaced, I guess, about almost 5 months ago. But I guess these allegations, there's been stories following him for a minute. So I would say that it's one thing for accusations to be out there, but let me take two examples. This example with Diddy, Cassie going to court and having that complaint. Now, not all lawyers are great lawyers, but a good lawyer knows how to vet these things and to figure out, like, for instance, the Lizzo lawsuit. I think there's one part of that lawsuit that's probably solid. She should not have asked those people to go to a sex club. They were employees, not her friends. But the other stuff, saying that there was racial discrimination because some darker skinned women were fired and somebody else wasn't, that they thought should have been fired, that's kind of specious. But the point is that they got to have something to back it up. Let's say, to put it in the colloquial, Cassie's attorney came with the receipts, with a CVS receipt, no doubt, right? So that person knew what they were doing. Right. Maybe the folks, and I'm not as familiar with this, that have accused Charlemagne, maybe they haven't gotten to that point yet. But if they get to that point where the facts are laid out bare for everybody to see it, it's hard to deny it. Right? When you go through and you read it like that, and you get to see a picture. So, and even me as a lawyer, the only reason why those claims is because I know the law. And I was like, okay, that claim is not going to fly the way they think it is, but that doesn't mean that those things maybe didn't happen. It's just not going to have maybe the legal outcome.
Exactly. It's not going to have legs.
It's not going to sign a complaint that's just based on lies. Unless they work for Donald Trump and they're trying to overthrow an election. That's a whole nother show that Miss Pam can have me back to talk about.
And the thing is, with Cassie's lawsuit, as you pointed out, Narissa, no lawyer is going to jeopardize his or her legal license.
Yeah.
To put up BS. Like if I'm going because even when I was a reporter at the Associated Press, and this was many years ago, I would always say, if I'm putting my name on something, that means I'm prepared to stand behind it. And if this attorney signed off on this, and then the blueback would tell you that, that means that it had to be some meat to what Cassie was saying. And again, the fact that Diddy settled so quickly, it wasn't even 24 hours. Not even 24 hours. The fact that he settled so quickly, what that tells me is that he did not want to go through discovery.
It hit the internet November 16th and November.
And a day later, yep, it was settled.
They had their statements and everything. So,
yep.
And from a PR perspective, I don't care how much good that he tries to do, he's cooked. I don't see
well,
it.
Well, here's the thing. I disagree only in this context. I think even if he had taken this to trial, I think let's say God forbid he took this to trial and the jury ruled in his favor. I still don't think that would have helped him because look at Kevin Spacey. Look at how many accusations he's had. Look at how many times he's been in court. Look at how many times he's prevailed. Has anyone seen him in a Hollywood project since House of Cards?
Mm-hmm. I think I saw a rumor earlier this year that they were going to put him in like some kind of indie thing and people just like lost it. But then you can look at there's still why is Woody Allen still making movies and people still trying to convince you that his boring, horrible movies are Oscar quality #1, but also like this dude. First of all, if you believe Ronan Farrow, which I do, then he abused his own child, but then he groomed his own stepdaughter and married her. How sick do you have to be?
Sicko.
I'm sure Mia Farrow wanted to kill that dude. I mean, just like I brought you into my home and trusted you.
Yeah.
And then you do. That's horrible.
The only good thing about that relationship was that Mia and Woody were not married. That's the only good thing about that. But yeah, what he did was foul. But my point is that, okay, even if Diddy were to have, I do think settling as quickly as he did, again, that, that's not the flex Diddy wants to believe it is. But again, even if he fought it, I think the fact that so many people like myself are like, you know what? I can see him doing this stuff. Like we've heard the stories, we've heard the rumors with other people, and it's like, yeah, I wouldn't put it past him to have done these things, unfortunately. And I'm sorry that Cassie had to go through that, but it's like, you know what? I can actually see him doing that. I just don't see why she would lie about that.
She didn't lie. And believe me, that law firm, they got a real funny name. And all three of them lawyers, those partners signed off on that dotted line with their real signature. No,
yeah, they're not going to stake their reputation like that online.
On Fifth Avenue with that kind of rent. No, they did very well. They did.
And not only that, but I do want to say though, to the point that I think that Sidra said is that you do on some level, unfortunately, still have to have some access to money to try to get justice in this country. And that is a huge failing of our justice system. It's not right and it's not fair. And that is not a slam against the people. I know public defenders are some of the hardest working folks that you could
underpaid
land, like in no resources, So I do think that it could be better, right? And we have to do better. However, I do think that what we need to do is also alert people to some of these free or low cost things that people can do and go to when they're looking for justice. There are different law schools that run clinics. There's different legal aid places that can help you or refer you to other places that can help you. And there's some of these big law firms take on certain cases pro bono just because it looks good for them, you know, and, you know, so that's what they get out of it. And then they can also train their associates on how to do different areas of law from time to time. But yeah, it's can't lie and say that money does not play some role. But on the other hand, we can't pretend that Combs was not able to get away with so much for so long without the money.
That's right, because he's a billionaire.
Yeah.
Billionaire, allegedly. Well, listen, guys, we've way past our time. We have way, and I have enjoyed you all. There's so much more. We could go down this rabbit hole, and I would have you here all day playing videos and stuff. But I just picked out a few things that I thought would be appropriate for the conversation. I'm glad we had this talk because
I'm glad too.
And I'm sure we'll probably have to pick up on it again because we have to be, as adults, as the grown-ups in the room, we have got to do better with our kids, period. Point blank, full stop, period. You know? Absolutely. Well, listen, let's sign off and wave everybody goodbye. Please hit that like button and subscribe to my channel if you're on YouTube. Please, please, please. All right. See you guys.
Stay safe.